Hey, Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Today, we got a really special episode for you. We have a person who is an industry veteran who started a CRO, and it's something that a lot of people want to aspire towards. I'm noticing that a lot, that people who have worked in the space for any given period of time. Like there's this subsection of people, and I want to get into that with you, Donna. Um, what made you want to do that? Like there, we could unpack a few things, but before anything, want to thank the sponsor of the show, Viva. Thank you, Viva, for sponsoring. Viva, are you familiar with Viva, Donna, at all? Viva,
Very much.
very much so. See, from the sponsors and CROs, they Viva's a household name, so Viva really wants sites. They want to become a household name for sites too, and I think that's the next chapter in their company's growth is getting sites. So it's absolutely free. Viva Site Vault. So in the link, it's sites.viva.com. You can digitize your regulatory documents, make it e-reg. Then you could passively choose to share your reg docs as you update them with the sponsor's trial master file, completely passively by just clicking a box. So thank you, Viva, for sponsoring the show. And Donna, thank you. So Donna Stram, she's an industry veteran. She is a CRO founder of a boutique CRO, which that's a growing trend. Actually, yesterday, Don, I was interviewing a study director from a biotech, and he also said, you know what? We're noticing a lot of boutique CROs as well. Matter of fact, some of the discussion I had with him are similar topics we're going to be covering today. So it's always good to get someone else's thoughts on it, especially somebody who started out in this industry as a CRA. And maybe we'll even go before CRA. Like what's your background? Then how did you discover this industry in the first place, Don?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. I was a foreign language major in college, and I'm bilingual, French English. And I graduated in the late '80s during the recession, so there weren't a lot of jobs.
Maybe
Um,
similar to now, like we're about to enter into the same market kind of.
let's hope that the job market for people is a lot better. Um,
For research, I think we're okay.
yeah,
But I got your
exactly.
recession, foreign language major.
So
Doesn't look too promising.
no, no, it doesn't. I was recruited by a Swiss biotech company because they needed a clinical trial administrator with the right citizenship. They needed an American, but they also needed someone who was bilingual. And they figured it was going to be easier to hire and teach the science than to hire a scientist and teach the language.
Do you think
So
that's true?
I do. I think that learning a language is, it's certainly doable. It just takes time. And
Yeah.
I think that if what you want is just a generalist who can pay attention and dig in, I think it's certainly it was a cheaper hire then anyway.
You said one of my favorite things, generalist. So do you think you had the makings of a generalist? Because that's something I recommend all my viewers and listeners strive to become if they want career safety, really.
hmm Certainly, I probably didn't think of it that way because I was very young. But as throughout my career, if you can add another skill, if one opportunity came across to add another skill, then I did. Which is how I went from clinical trial administrator to CRA to quality assurance to project management.
Wow. But
Yeah.
let's look into this a little bit more. So you graduate foreign language major, you know nothing about clinical research, maybe not even that it exists. You're out there like in the world, foreign language major, not thinking about clinical research. How does a biotech find you?
Well, I was temping.
Mm.
I was answering phones for a Holter monitoring company.
Ah,
And I was temping, and they hired me for an emergency that they had. and I kept staying on and staying on, and then the full-time job was offered.
I gotcha. So they must have seen something in you besides just the fact that you were multilingual. Do you think, in hindsight, do you think they saw what was it besides the fact that you spoke the language that they liked? Do you think now looking back, with a hindsight 2020?
I think looking back, what I had to offer other than the language was enthusiasm and work. I was so pleased to be doing. I come from a medical family, and to have
Ah,
stumbled into something tangential, even at that layer, at that level, I was just so pleased and so excited about the industry, and that goes a long way. I swear to God, I when I hire right now, what I'm really looking for is enthusiasm and just like, oh, this is great because everything you can teach almost everything,
you
but
know
what you
what
can't
though?
is digging in.
Yeah, you can't teach that effort, but so many people are listening. Maybe they're at the early stage of their career, so they think that this is a cliche. Like they don't believe it. Oh, passion is everything. But the more I'm in this field, and you certainly also, like the more it's actually true. Like there's a reason why certain things are cliches.
I know that since we started the CRO in '95, I have hired a number of enthusiastic generalists, probably 10 over the last 20 years, with no background in the industry.
Wow.
And they have all ended up in the industry. And it's very, very gratifying. People love it or they don't. And if they do love it, it's it, there's not a lot of barrier to entry if you're willing to start at the beginning. I mean, that's been my experience. I can't speak for anyone else.
That's been mine as well. And a lot of people's that I've hired also. So that's interesting, Donna. So they recruited you, this biotech, Swiss biotech recruited you. They put you in the CTA role, clinical trial assistant, right? Or administrator?
And they called it administrator, but it was basically that. I was a CTA.
Yeah, these acronyms are so confusing, but they're basically, guys, if you're listening, just listen to the or read the job responsibilities for any role. So, how quickly from CTA did you go to CRA?
I spent a solid 3 years with this company, and then I started looking around for the next step. And after 3 years, I joined a CRO, unfortunately now defunct.
Ah, who was it?
Uh, uh, God, they were in Hartford, Connecticut. I actually have to check my CV.
Was it
Um,
Kendall? No, Kendall was
no,
Cincinnati. I remember
no,
them.
it was. Oh gosh, I'll have to look that up. Actually,
Yeah,
they were.
wow.
I see them. They were in Hartford, Connecticut. Um, they were
What this?
acquired by Boehringer Ingelheim, I think.
Oh, okay. So they got absorbed into like big pharma. It's
It'll come to
interesting.
me in the middle of the night. I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I gotta tell you."
That I tell people the story of Ikevia and how Dr. Geelings founded it, and basically he invented the concept of a CRO. But it's interesting to if we can go back and look at those early CROs. Like you said, most of them got acquired or became part of other pharma or part of like the big five now. But just interesting to go back and see kind of what their value prop was back then versus what it is today, which sometimes are not necessarily congruent.
A lot of the goal, there was a wave of CROs being absorbed into larger companies back in the early to mid '90s, and
Mm.
I think for a lot of companies that was actually the goal was to set up a viable CRO and then be absorbed. Perfectly understandable, and very value adding to everybody there. But I do think there was a wave that where the CROs would get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger by absorbing more and more of the smaller ones.
And do you think that ran in parallel? Because I started in this industry in '05. Prior to that, full time. Um, Prior to that, I interned here and there. So technically, I started like 2000, but really full time was '04, '05. You were talking about mid '90s, right? In your case, do you? Did you see the shift? Because I think I got in when private industry was already robust. Like you had private sites. That was the majority of trials when I started. But mid '90s, were you there like in the middle of the shift from academia heavy to let's balance it with private sites?
Yes, yes. In fact, one of my early study coordinators from, gosh, would have been very, very early in my career, went and set up, she was working as a study coordinator, and she went and hired a building, set up a research site, hired an MD, and now she has this thriving business in Boston, Pawtucket Medical, I believe. And it was amazing watching over the last 20 years her achievements from a single site where she was working as a study coordinator to a very, very well respected um, research uh, conglomerate. Basically, it's huge. Pawtucket Medical is huge.
Mm,
So yeah, I do think that a lot of that went from academic to small sites to I think the SMOs grew out of that period too.
yeah.
Because when I started, there were no SMOs that I ever came across.
Yeah, when I started, SMOs were like all the rage. And it was like my goal as a new site owner to like, hey, one day maybe I could be a SMO. And I think in hindsight, it was the wrong blueprint to follow. I mean, luckily for me, that bubble popped around '08, '09 during the last recession. Actually, that bubble popped just like we're seeing the DCT bubble, in my opinion, pop today. There's so many DCT vendors going out of business, laying people off, but small private sites are thriving. Um,
I thought about starting up an SMO too, and I came to the same conclusion.
it's just something was didn't sit right with fast growth, like scaling fast, but the doctors and the patients were not part of the company. You were almost like renting them. It just
Mhm.
seemed like a funny business. It seemed like a house of cards even back then to me. Because I've always worked with doctors in their offices. Like I made the doctor my partner. So now they're like in business with me. These SMOs would just go in there. They would either pay rent or not pay rent to the doctor. And then basically they were their employees. And the doctor could tell them to go kick rocks whenever they wanted to. So, and same thing with the SMO. They could leave whenever they're done messing with the database of the doctors. It just never made sense to me, and in hindsight, it didn't work out. And but it's interesting to see the shift from academia to private industry, and that's also the same time CROs really started gaining market share. I think that's like around the same time IKEA or at the time Quintiles went public for the first time. So they were really making headway in this industry.
Yeah, the early years, most of it was about a 50-50 mix between industry, being hired or contracted with by industry, and supporting CROs as a contractor.
And compare that to now, 2023, what are you seeing? Like 50-50 back then, what is it now, do you think?
Most honestly, I do a lot of work with CROs. Headcount is always challenging because the buzzword right sizing or just in time. Everyone needs personnel and they need them immediately. So I get a lot of calls from placement agencies, CROs, who need somebody immediately, uh, which is a slightly different model than what I'm familiar with.
Mhm, mhm.
When
Well,
I project management, I know roughly when we're going to need the CRAs, and I've lined them up months ahead of time so that we aren't scrambling.
yeah, no, the industry is absolutely out of control right now. I'm on a with the site that I own here in Yuma, Arizona, we're in startup mode for like 3 studies, and on one of the studies, we're ready to go. We did all our vendor training. There's like an X-ray tech that did his training, but they're still not activated, and I'm asking my monitor, "Hey, we want to start screening next week. What's happening?" He's like, "Well, ask your startup specialist." And I'm like, "Okay, I will, but who is it?" Like, we have no clue who to even report to, or who to ask for things. And we're a rescue site. Do you believe it? Like,
What about
The,
us? You know who the project manager is?
he gave me the info, so I need to email the project manager. But you would think, like, we're in startup mode for like a month now, that somebody would follow up with me and say, "Hey, why are you not screening yet?" But I'm the one having to do this. And we're a rescue site, and this is one of the big five CROs we're dealing with. So it's crazy. The industry is absolutely nuts right now.
We are very high touch. We are small and very agile. So we don't tend to have those kinds of issues. I mean, everyone has my phone number. If they have a question, they just call me.
Yeah, if we were one of your sites for your CRO, you'd be on the phone. We would already have this problem resolved.
Or at least you'd know what was going on and
Yeah,
you'd have a roadmap.
that's
Always
all I
solve
want. I
everything.
wanted a roadmap. I basically asked them, what are we still missing? Because I think everything's done on our end, but somehow we don't have a green light. Um, so yeah, that's big CRO for you. Uh, we'll get back to it, but back to your career trajectory. So when you became CRA, was it you said you went with a CRO at the time?
Mhm. Well, I started, yes, I went from a CRO because I will say that CROs, their training is excellent. And I was aware that coming from CTA to CRA was going to be a bit of a learning gap. And the CRO, no, National Medical Research, that's who they are, that,
Ah,
out of
okay,
Hartford.
okay.
Um, Fantastic training plan. I mean, intensive 6 weeks, making sure that you understood the fundamentals. And a lot of it was, you come across it as a CTA. I'm glad I did it. The road warrior part was challenging at times. And after a while, I went and started. I wanted to come home. I'm a Boston girl, so I wanted to come home from Connecticut because somehow 2 hours was too far. Um, so I started looking around, and I ended up at Immunogen in Cambridge on Sydney Street, and oh, loved them. They, I would still be there. They had in the '90s some financial issues, and they had to do layoffs at that time. And clinical wasn't touched, but we were such a tight group. We would pull into the parking lot at 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning, 50 cars there already. And then after the layoffs, I pulled in that Monday and there were like 2 people there. And I'm like, my
Wow,
beloved Immunogen was gutted. They are back on feet now. They're
they are
wonderful.
back. Yeah, somebody took them public and then private again, or I can't remember their oncology group if I remember.
That's the group I work for. They're such a good company. I was so pleased to see them come back.
So you
Um,
were there in the middle of their layoffs. And when was this? What years were this? 95. Okay. Wow. And so but you being the CRA, you were not one of the ones laid off.
no, they didn't touch clinical because we had a
I
bunch of
see.
studies open. But
Wow.
they touched the rest of the company, and we were so tight as a group. It was just a lovely place to work, absolutely delightful.
Uh,
What's funny is there are Immunogen alumni that I run into all the time. I just finished a contract where I ran into somebody I'd worked with at Immunogen, and it was like old home week. It,
it's like the old alumni. You guys, I mean, that original group, 95 till today, what is that, like almost 30 years?
don't do the
You
math.
you can do a lot in this industry in that time. I mean, I'm sure some of those people went on, like you said, one of your colleagues is a founder of a conglomerate. Like you're founded your own boutique CRO. Like there's probably a lot of that spirit amongst those early employees or I don't know if it was early, but sounds like it was a startup back then.
It
Immunogen.
was probably not quite a startup, but it was definitely not what it was not what it is now. It
So
was.
when did you go from them to CRO, or was it backwards? CRO to
I went from a CRO to Immunogen.
okay. Okay. So you were already CRA, then you went to Immunogen. Which one you prefer better, the sponsor?
I did like the sponsor better. I mean, Immunogen was a very special place. And I really enjoyed my team. I enjoyed my colleagues. It was delightful.
And then when were the seeds planted for, hey, maybe I can start my own CRO one day? Did that come early in your career, or was that something that kind of developed that took
There
some
was
time?
a I was an independent contractor for about 10 years.
Uh,
Immunogen had their layoffs, and I was recruited to become independent by what was then Sandoz. I co-authored a publication with one of their investigators who was working at Sandoz, and he gave me a call after the layoffs and said, "Hey, if you're interested in making a jump, we would love for you to be part of our initial consulting team." So I did, and that was a solid 10 years of consulting.
mm,
And the CRO idea just evolved because more and more of my clients needed more than one person. So I incorporated in 2009 and staffed up. And now I have a team of, I think, 8 full-time um, internal employees and a huge roster of consultants that I call on to staff up as necessary. So we're basically a turnkey ClinOps department now.
now with your boutique CRO.
Yes. So if you're a company that is running a clinical trial and you're lacking ClinOps staff, you need a project manager, you need a CTA, you need some regulatory, you need quality assurance. Um, we provide that. And if you need services in addition to that, data management, medical monitor, stats, we have informal relationships with other boutique CROs that provide those services, but not ClinOps.
Yeah,
ITS up in Canada, we work with. Um, I do get a lot of work from Clora, which is a Boston-based group. Um, just it's we just have these relationships with companies to to fulfill larger needs.
I think
Everyone has their
that's
specialty.
I think that's the survival strategy. It's actually an advantage. It's more of a decentralized way to do business. I know my boutique CRO, we basically focus on study startup and site selection, and that's our strength. Really, is the site networks that we have, and the influence we have over the site. So that's how we know each other is um, collaborating. Even though I don't think we've officially worked on a project, but we're already started to.
Well,
We will, yeah. Um, I think that's actually do you think that's a growing trend, or do you think these CROs, um, are just gonna get bigger by acquisition?
I think both of those things are true. I think
Wow.
CROs will naturally keep getting bigger because if they keep absorbing smaller organizations, that's a win-win for everybody. I do think that smaller organizations and sort of a federated connection of different companies that you work with to provide the larger scope of services is a good way to meet the need for just-in-time hiring. Because if you need a data manager, I know where I can get you one, and I have connections with
Mm,
a partner company that provides those services. So when that time comes, we already have somebody lined up. So they're slightly different needs.
I see. Going back to you being an independent contractor before you started your boutique, it makes sense to me. When you're an independent contractor, you're essentially your own business, right? You're running, I mean, your job, whatever you're doing, is your business. I think it's actually a good precursor to if it's something you want to do, starting your own business, which not enough people do. Because if you have enough experience as a CRA or as a project manager or even as a coordinator, I mean, you could be an independent contractor in those roles. And if eventually one day you want to start your own site or start your own CRO or start whatever, a vendor company, you can do it and you've already trained yourself to where you're taking care of yourself. You're
Yes,
relying on your um, initiatives to get business for yourself. It's basically an easy transition to to being a business owner. Is that exactly what you did, more or
that
less?
is. I incorporated as an LLC when I was a contractor, and then we rebranded as a CRO. But it is you get a sense as a contractor where the needs are. And those things do change. There's an enormous need right now for QA personnel. There's an enormous need for, believe it or not, clinical trial associates. Um, and so you begin to learn where the choke points are and how to meet those needs for your clients. It's not always they don't always need you, but they need somebody. And if you have that somebody, then all of a sudden you're evolving into more than just being a contractor for yourself.
I definitely see that. I think not enough people talk about that because when I was a site owner my whole life, but I had a time period where business at the site got slow. So I became a contract CRA and I worked for this small Korean company. They had there was a US subsidiary, but they did a lot of work. Actually, all their work were with Korean sponsors. And the only reason they needed me was they needed somebody in California who had research experience to be their CRA. So I worked with them for 3 years, and that contract CRA role turned into helping them get training for their new employees, onboarding their new employees, becoming more or less like a project manager, and then that evolved into the CRO, the boutique CRO we have today. I mean, it's not something I really set out to do, but it's something that organically happened due to the opportunities.
That's exactly my path too. Just
Mm.
staying flexible and agile and giving the client what they want.
And this is why generalist is important because you never know what they're going to ask. And if your initial inclinations to say, no, I'm not sure, I haven't done that, or if it's something you don't want to do, that's different. But, a lot of times these people, they don't know as much about the process as you do. Even if you're just a CRA, you probably know a lot more about the entire drug development process than they might know. They might know like a tiny portion of it, but you're basically a generalist, whether you think of yourself as one or not. So and networking is huge because if you're lacking something, somebody's gonna be able to help you out. So this basically how you started your boutique CRO. That's amazing. And you've been doing that now for how long?
30 plus years.
30 years boutique CRO. So you've seen the industry evolve so much.
Mm.
You
Oh, when
you
I
have
started paper CRFs, there was no such thing as an ETMF. Um,
a
I mean, I started ironically in device, and the rules were so loosey goosey then. Everything, it's been an enormous shift.
What do you
I
think
mean,
about the first year I started was paper CRFs too, and then we immediately, like the next year, it
yeah,
was like everything just EDC. But I did see enough paper CRF to see that change. What do you think now? Now I'm training my coordinators at the site, and I'm asking them, "Hey, are you entering data?" And it's kind of like a blurred line because they're like, "No, the IRT does a lot of it for us." So I'm like, "What do you mean the IRT?" So I look at it and they're like, "Yeah, lab results get entered through the central lab, uh, enrollment, like all the demographic, date of birth, all that stuff gets entered for them. We're using eSource, so now the
that's a
CRAs,
huge change.
it's huge. Like it's so different. And where do you think this is headed? Because do you think like something like data entry? I mean, I see this as not being necessary, really.
I think that eSource, EDCs were a huge game changer. Inform, the early ones,
I
huge
remember
game.
that.
I still love Inform.
Yeah.
Uh, Metadata Rave, they're all great, but Inform will always have my heart. The little
You
stop,
remember
stopping the
Impala?
lights.
You remember Impala, the IVRS, where you had to call in and randomize
Yes.
somebody with your phone?
Yep.
These coordinators don't know anything about that these days.
Funny. I think that we're going to quite naturally, because again, everybody is understaffed, and for the last 20 years, research sites have been understaffed. Study coordinators are being asked to do more and more. They're seeing patients, they're doing data entry, they're doing regulatory. I think that because of the understaffing, there's a huge impetus to reduce the amount of actual labor that can be done electronically. to increase the amount of labor that can be done electronically. So I think that e-source is really going to be the next wave that changes the industry. If study coordinators don't have to spend hours entering data, that if it can be reliably entered automatically, if
Hmm.
e-source becomes, it just gets transitioned into the eCRF, I think that's the next thing that's going to be um, game changing. That's
Yeah,
my.
I do think so as well. There are some benefits to redundancy. Um,
Mhm.
One of my coordinators asked me, she's brand new. She said, "Why are we entering data twice?" Because she's using eSource, so she's entering data as in real time on the eSource. And then we tell her, "Hey, you have to do EDC as well." I know a lot of it's done for you, but she's like, "Why? I don't understand why we have to do that." I said, "I don't either. That's just how it is. It's probably gonna change soon, but for now, this is how we do it." But I do see some benefit in the redundancy, although the pros definitely outweigh the cons. We can catch some deviations, um,
Mhm.
minor deviations based on data entry. Like you're entering results for something in the EDC, and you realize, wait, we didn't get your analysis and EDC is asking for it. So then you can do an unscheduled visit for whatever reason, either it wasn't done or the labs lost it, which happens. Um, Bring the patient back in, you avoid a deviation, right? As opposed to letting it passively just enter whatever data you have, and then your CRA comes and catches a deviation. So I do
Yes,
see some benefit, but it's definitely not enough to change this trend from happening.
yes. I think that it's going to end up being a blend of, lab values can absolutely be pushed directly from eSource to the EDC. Um, but there also has to be a determination, is this clinically significant? The personnel process is never going to be fully out of it. But the mechanical, if we can reduce the mechanical redundancies, I do think that that's a real benefit.
Yeah. What do you think CROs are doing? Because I mean this IRT thing now, it started like as just a more advanced IWRS.
Yeah.
And now it's just so much more than that because it's like a this master integrator of everything. What do you
I,
think CROs like? They're becoming tech companies more or less. So like, what do you think about that? Like the big ones.
yeah, the big ones are much like we talk about with boutique CROs and have the evolution of services. I do see the CROs adding what would have been a standalone tech company to their offerings. They can do full data management. They can do integration between the EDC and the IRT, and it makes sense to me from a business perspective. Give the client what they want. If the sponsor wants one-stop shopping, it does make sense to go with a big CRO that has all of these offerings. I can totally see that. There are layers of cost associated with that, of course. But that's definitely a very reasonable choice.
I think about this a lot with the big CROs. I don't think they actually wanted the tech. I think they were perfectly fine not innovating and charging a premium on their manual services. I think tech vendors like Viva, like Metadata, I mean, they're going to innovate regardless. So I think the big CROs are adopting these things out of necessity to not fall behind because now sponsors expect these things. But
I
I
would
think
agree.
something interesting is happening. I want to get your take on this. Don't you think the more tech that comes out, the easier it is for a sponsor to take back control of their study and say, "Hey, why are we paying the CRO to manage everything? All this tech is off the shelf. We can just hire people in-house to manage it."
That's a really interesting take. I do see that happening. I think one of the reasons Medidata Rave and like Medrio have been so popular in the last few years is because there is an aspect of they're a box of Legos, and the sponsor can bring people in to do their own data management. I do see that escalating. Um, some sponsors don't want that. They don't want the internal staffing, and certainly with the difficulties everybody's having in staffing up this year, I I can see that slowing down a little bit. But no, I would agree with you. I do think that that's an industry trend that we may be seeing with sponsors, hiring their own staff and just licensing the off the shelf software.
Yeah, and then I mean, we haven't even discussed AI and its capabilities. I mean, when it comes to monitoring, okay, SDR, source data review, maybe not, but SDV, how difficult is that to actually pull off, like for AI, to match data on source with EDC? It's like SDV is could be automated. You can you can look forward a little and see how that could happen.
I do think that we're never going to be able to get the monitoring, not that we want to. The job of monitoring source document verification is maybe halfway down the list of what the FDA says a monitor does. Um, Analysis, interpretation, communication, management, training,
Mhm.
source document verification. But the simple, matching a hemoglobin with a hemoglobin with eSource, that's going to be obviated. But you can't get the if the hemoglobin is shot up, then you need the analysis of the monitor to say, okay, is this a known side effect? Is this an error? I mean, there's a lot of analysis that occurs when you're doing source document verification. So I'd be surprised if that would ever disappear.
Yeah.
We'll see. I think more remote monitoring.
Oh
I'm not
yeah.
quite sure how I feel about remote monitoring. I think you get a lot more
I'm not
information.
sure either. I think you can do more. I'm seeing it organically at my own site, just with like a few studies. We
Hmm.
have eSource and eReg. So one of my CRAs just moved. She moved from Phoenix to Houston, and they give her autonomy of how she wants to monitor. So she's like, "Oh, it's pretty good that you guys are using eSource eReg because I can just remote monitor now. Every now and then I have to come in and look at the actual IP, and but I can remote monitor more or less. So it's not anything that we're mandating on her. I mean, we'd prefer that she remote monitors, but it's just something that's organically occurring. Like, okay, it's more convenient now. I can do an extra IMV, and I guess it's better for us because each time she comes, it does trigger a payment to the site. So we're like, okay, yeah, just do another remote monitoring visit if you need to. I mean, it's a win-win, I think.
The pandemic, if it taught us anything, it taught us what jobs can really be done remotely. And I don't think you can do everything remotely. I do think there's a place for, on-site auditing, on-site monitoring, on-site project management. But there is a lot that can be done remotely with the new tech. I mean, Zoom meetings were rare before the pandemic, and
We
now
didn't know what Zoom was. I didn't
we're
know
all
what
on
Zoom was.
phone, on video all the time.
Yeah, Zoom. I had no idea what Zoom was before COVID, and now it's a daily part of my every day,
There
like
you go.
multiple times a day. I do notice that with the remote visits, and I'm just anecdotal, site owner, CRC with CRA, when you lose a little bit of that human element, um, we get along really well with our CRA, and that's probably because she came in a lot early on. And I do notice it's the same CRA. She didn't change. We didn't change. She's more distant now that her last few visits were remote.
Hmm.
So I don't know what that actually. I don't know how to articulate it better. It's not like she's meaner or anything, but it's just more distant. Like you lose something.
Yeah, I agree. When I do project management for my clients, even if I can do everything remotely, but I do encourage them to hold on-site. I usually, like, for example, I was working for a company in Philadelphia for a number of years, and I would just fly to Philadelphia every couple of weeks to spend a day on site, not because I couldn't do the work here, but because for some intangible reason, things happened on site, even that you need to have the human connection at times. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be every day. I would never say to go into the office every day, but it is important not to be fully remote all the time.
There is a sweet spot, and I think the benefits are more site compliance
Hmm.
because, and I don't know about you, you're on the other side of it, but as a site owner, when I meet a CRA in person and then like we get along, she emails things, I'll make sure it gets done quick because we have a rapport. The more time goes by that I don't see her, but we just do Zooms or emails, the less I lose that motivation to respond to their requests until she comes back, and then it's like resets the cycle. So it's
Yep.
weird. It's very strange. I don't really know how else to articulate it, but there's something there.
And I know exactly, I think I know exactly what you mean. Zoom is great, but Zoom is better than email, but not as good as, being face to face with people.
Hmm.
It encourages very direct, very targeted communication, which is useful, but you don't see each other really as people over Zoom,
No,
um, because that's not what Zoom does best.
you could do like daily Zooms, I think, and it would equate to maybe one in-person visit a month as far as like that rapport. But now you're
Everyone has
losing
daily
the
Zooms.
yeah, but now you're losing the efficiency, right? Because you don't need the redundancy. So there's something like there's always a trade-off. Um, why are boutique CROs growing and becoming more popular with sponsors?
Oh boy, I can speak for only my own perceptions. Boutique CROs have lower headcounts, so you're getting, I think, more experienced people and people farther along in their career who are actually hands-on working on your project. There's not there's less, I think, middle management in a CRO, so you're dealing with your whole team. Um, I think that the sponsors are liking that, and I also think that it's this, they don't want personnel on a project until the very last second. So
Mm,
uh, I think that there's a bit of agility that these boutique CROs are able to provide. That's a little harder if you're a Quintiles or an IQVIA.
mhm.
Um, Conversely, the bigger CROs do provide one-stop shopping, which is valuable to larger companies for more complicated studies.
Yeah, the one stop, I mean, that's makes things a little bit easier on the sponsor side, but they're paying for it and maybe the quality is not as good as you can get from a boutique CRO that is decentralized and connected with all the other stakeholders that could basically become a full service CRO just piece by
Yeah,
piece.
we I tend to see a lot of really firm commitments with the smaller CRO, with the boutique CROs, where you've got a project, you know exactly who your partners are, you know exactly what the sponsor needs, and we tend to be very, very high touch. Um, you can get a hold of your project manager, you can get a hold of the company president by text at 10 o'clock at night, because that's just the kind, I find that personality type more often in small boutique CROs. I mean, you hate to use the word workaholic, but some of us are.
So in the 30 years you've been running this boutique CRO, um, are sponsor needs still the same now as they were then? And if so, what are like the top three?
Oh, I can't tell you over time because, of course, I was not in direct contact with sponsors earlier in my career. Um, Sponsor needs now, the client base that Chimera Clinical has is small um, pharmaceutical companies that typically they think they need a project manager when in fact they need the ClinOps department.
Mm,
And the biggest need I see among my client base is a little bit of guidance as to exactly what the process is for running a clinical study, because there's a lot they don't that they may not be aware of when they kick off the projects. So I think that in addition to the actual rolling up your sleeves and getting to work doing this, they need a little guidance on, okay, well, these are the regulations, these are the plans we have to have. This is approximately what your budget's going to look like. Um, have you thought about this and this and this? And I think that it's easier for the sponsors to sort of understand when they have just the same team they're working with month after year after year. And there's I think a trust and a communication that develops because there's in my experience, there's very low turnover um, with the smaller companies.
But the bottom line isn't the bottom line hasn't the bottom line always been we need X number of patients in Y period of time and
Mhm.
at this cost.
Yes.
Everything else is just noise or necessary evil.
Everything else is a necessary evil.
Yeah. So if
It's
you could
hard to,
deliver the everything else perfectly, but you can't deliver the big picture on time and under budget,
we
I mean,
try,
but is that acceptable? Is that just like the norm? Like that's just status quo. Nobody does it anyway, so you don't
not
worry about
necessarily.
that.
No, I think that, I mean, recruitment and retention is always a challenge. There's always an expectation that the rate of enrollment is going to be faster than it ever ends up being. And when you do the math and say, okay, we have to subtract this percentage, this is what the real number of enrollment may be, there's always like a, well, no, no, we can't have that. So recruitment and retention is always challenging. One of the things that obviously everyone needs to do when they plan their studies is what do you foresee the problems? Where do you foresee the bottlenecks being? Where are the problems that we can solve in advance to bring patients on study and to keep them there? So you have your recruitment plans, you have you do your problem solving in advance, and then you roll with what happens. I mean, I'm finishing a COVID study, and we've had these wild roller coaster enrollments where there's a lot of subjects that come in and then nothing. And that couldn't have been foreseen. And you just roll with it and you come up with other stratagems.
Are you do you advocate for rescue sites or do you advocate generally for let's fix the strategies for our existing sites that we have when it comes to enrollment?
Both. Some sites need sites, there's always a few sites on every study that thought they could do it and they don't have the population. And they realize that. And there's only so much you can do in those situations. I If they need to be replaced, then they need to be replaced. And I advocate for fixing problems that can be fixed and bringing on additional sites if if that's the need. I mean, there's no point in continuing to do something that doesn't work with the site. It's not good for them. It's not good for the study. So
Why do you think
I'm very proactive about replacing sites once it's been determined that they really aren't going to be able to do the job.
yeah. And why do you think that happens so often? Because happens to me too as a site owner. Like we get a study on the surface, it looks like it's going to be easy, and then we get the SIV and we learn all the nuances, and we're like, wait a minute, this we got to divide our numbers by 10 now. This is like new information to me.
Right. Well, what's funny is that one of the challenges that we have from a project management perspective is that the site knows long before we do that they mentally divided their enrollment by 10. Um, I think this new field of site specialist, site startup specialist, is evolving particularly for this reason, to take a little more time to dig in and determine before the SIV whether the population really exists and whether you have the personnel and whether there's the training that's been done. Are you aware of exactly what the problems might be or enrollment? How are you going to get your patients? Um, but there's always, you can have a population in March and then you get initiated in May and they're gone. That's it. Just happens sometimes.
Yeah,
It's not always the fault of anyone. It sometimes just happens. If you have a huge snowbird population, your population changes seasonally.
yeah, that's us here in Yuma also. Um, Interesting. So, what do you think the hard we talked about automation, AI maybe, tech. What do you think the most difficult aspects of running a study are that you don't see in its current form AI ever automating?
There are a lot of new sites, new investigational sites that are popping up because it's a big business. And those first years, AI isn't helping with the training of study personnel, training to the regulations, training to industry standard. That's very bumpy when you have a site early in its development. And I have found, because I love working with new sites, but I have found that when you have a relatively new investigative site, there has to be a lot of hands-on prep to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that the expectations for knowledge and training and documentation are well understood. And that's not always so obvious.
Mhm.
So I always prepare for that. Um, and other than that, the industry is in tremendous flux, and it's been accelerated by the pandemic. So it's a really interesting time that we're in right now. I do think we're going to see more automation, as we've discussed, more AI, more electronic reduction of hands-on work. We're going to try and reduce the hands-on, data entry as much as we can. I think we're going to see some huge changes, and I think that they're happening now.
Yeah, I would agree. Although I think that just opens up more work that we don't know about. I mean, yeah, there's like I think there's so much we don't understand with this whole AI chat GPT. Like I've been playing around with it myself for a little bit, and it's almost like I'm developing a new skill in real time. Like, what do you ask it? Because the information's there. It's like a universe of information, but it's meaningless without an orchestrator. Like what do you do with it, and then how do you get some kind of productive output from it?
Yeah,
I think that's like the fact that it's there is one thing, but what do you do with it, and how do you make it something productive for your vertical? That's something completely different that we don't understand. I think there's gonna be new jobs created from that alone, and
I imagine.
possible.
I mean, how could there not be? It's clearly got use. We just don't know how to apply that to improve clinical research.
Yeah, I mean, we could barely name the problems of clinical research. Like people have been doing this for decades. They disagree on the problems of like the fundamental problems of our industry.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time. We're in a time of explosive change. And it's almost like what I remember of when we first started to get EDCs, moving from everyone's homegrown system to, you know, everyone having EDC. Uh, I'm excited for the next few years. I don't know what it's going to bring.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't think any of us do. I remember the EDC shift. My one CRA at the time, which was paper, she was getting ready to retire, and I was a brand new coordinator. And she told me, "Yeah, this is my last study. Thank God I'm getting out before the robots take over with EDC." So she thought the job was going to be obsolete in 5 years.
Yeah, I
CRA,
remember thinking that.
and this was 2005. Like, no, we're in more of a shortage now than we were then for CRAs.
Yeah, yep. Now, periods of change are unsettling. Everyone is sort of wondering what's going to happen next. And circling back to the beginning of our conversation, remaining agile and just being aware of what the industry needs so you can provide it.
Yeah.
It's it's what we all have to do.
Another thing that feels funny to me right now is watching industries and the economy basically crash and burn all around us. Yet in our little space, we're just growing, like it's just boom. And I don't know if it's hubris or just drinking our own Kool-Aid, but I don't really see it slowing down, and other industries are imploding.
This has always been a very strong industry, certainly in the United States. Um, we don't manufacture a lot of stuff, but we do a lot of drug development. Um, it, from my perspective, this has always felt like a very stable industry to be in. It goes up and down, and it changes. It's always in flux. But I don't see this as being an unstable industry at all.
And the kind of clients you work with, generally smaller biotech, smaller pharmaceutical, are they some of them are publicly traded, others are pre-IPO, I'm imagining.
Mhm.
Are you hearing things through the grapevine about financial problems they're encountering?
That would not be something that they would be sharing with me as
Ah,
a
okay.
hero. They, you one pays attention,
Yeah,
but certainly I couldn't speak to that because they would not be telling me that.
but
The
you're
only thing
not
I would know is what everybody in the industry knows.
are you noticing any hints of a slowdown?
Not right now. I hear it. I hear the last few months I've heard chatter about the industry slowing down, but that's also I hear that every year between November and January.
Well, yeah, everybody goes on vacation. Yeah, the industry always slows down during, it was one of the busiest November through January I can remember in our
Dang.
industry.
It's usually December is usually vacation time, December and August. But
We had 2 SIVs in the last week of the year, like before New Year's Eve. Nobody used to do that in the past. Like they're just off. And no, we did 2 SIVs.
the last 2, 3 years have been frantically busy for our company. And it's been quiet January so far, and everyone at Chimera is just sort of taking a break.
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
second now it's gonna explode again.
Well, thank you, Donna. Everybody go connect with Donna. Her LinkedIn. Do you want to link to your LinkedIn or do you want to link to something else underneath here?
Our website is under development right now. We're about to launch it. So why don't you link to my LinkedIn?
Okay, perfect.
When the website is ready for prime time, I'll have that link in my LinkedIn profile.
And I gotta ask one more thing because I get asked this a lot before we go. Sorry, Donna. This is like a good conversation. You don't have a science background, right? A lot of the audience also doesn't that's watching and looking for career opportunities. You've published a paper, from what I understand, from what I heard.
I have a couple of publications.
A couple. So, I mean, it's obviously self-taught, but did you basically learn the science on your own? And like, what involvement did you have on writing those papers?
Well, the papers were based on the studies uh, that I was integral to running. And when when you're doing your clinical study reports, when you're looking at your data, uh, everyone's involved at that point. So it was actually very very generous of them to include me as a co-author.
And like, how deep in the science do you have to get now? Like, do you find yourself learning the science, or can you kind of make it in this industry without like in the role you have without delving too deep into the science, or is it just something unavoidable?
No, in my opinion, it's unavoidable. You have to when I have a new therapeutic area, um, I immediately immerse myself into the documentation. When there's um, a new technology that the sponsor is using, I will immerse myself in it and learn everything I can about it because that's part of the job.
Hmm. Hmm. It's also what keeps the job interesting, I
Yep,
think.
helps to have a little bit of ADHD.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of it. Um, well, thank you, Donna. I really appreciate it. Look, everybody go connect with Donna. Her LinkedIn is below the video and in the show notes. It's been a pleasure. She's got a boutique CRO. Reach out to her for any inquiries or anything else that you may have questions about. And I really appreciate it, Donna. I look forward to working with you and possibly doing more podcasts.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Everybody like, subscribe, comment, share, and catch y'all later. Bye bye.